Good morning, afternoon, and night. Today, we are about to uncover one of the most misunderstood, mismanaged financial tools out there that likely you have. And if you don't have, you probably will have or have had. And I am about to go into too. And it's a little bit overwhelming. So you need to tune into this episode today to learn how to do it the right way. Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let the handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Here are your hosts, Russ Morgan, Joey Murray, and Will DeShazo. I'm sitting here with Russ Morgan, the founder of Everlight Financial and Financial Idea Guy, as well as Joey Murray, the Stallion Real Estate Professional Coach. How are you guys doing, guys?
Doing good, Will.
Thanks for being here. I'm excited to jump into this topic because one of the things I know is we just finished building a house, and there's one thing that comes along with the house.
A toilet.
And lots
a nice
of
pool. You got a really sweet pool, by the way.
Lots of boxes.
More TVs.
Well, we had to get some of those, new furniture, all those.
As you said, there's a lot of things that come with it.
Lots of things that comes with the houses, as you know. And I mean, I feel like I'm going to probably be moving for the rest of my life into this house. I mean, not to mention we had a pod, one of those storage rooms that you like put somewhere. I had one of those for 18 months whenever we were selling our house that I had to get all this junk out of there. And then they delivered this thing 2 weeks after we moved into our house. Right at the point I thought, hey, maybe we're at the point where I don't have to move anything anymore. Yeah, that's when they dropped off that old bucket. And I just wanted them could you just take that back and dump that out somewhere? Like, I don't care what's in there.
At that point, do you really even know what's in there? I mean, 18 months is a long time.
I heard one time they said, if you haven't seen it in a year, you don't need it.
Exactly.
True.
I tried to convince my wife on that. That was not the case.
So she's not a minimalist.
No, she's not a minimalist. And by the way, that's actually the second time I've heard that term this weekend when we were kayaking.
Yeah. I
heard that term. We had this one guy, they were talking about being a hoarder. And another guy said, what is the opposite of being a hoarder? And they said, a minimalist. So, wow.
Actually, yeah. So I was at Podcast Movement last week. There were I probably met 5 people there who had a podcast on minimalism.
Yeah.
And out of the 5, I think 3 were Aussies. So maybe it's an Australian thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about that one thing that comes with the house, right? You don't want to talk about the couch today or the kitchen today. It is the kitchen sink, basically, right?
Yes.
You want to talk about the dreaded home mortgage.
Yeah, I want to get into the mortgage. This seems like such a simple topic, Joey. And since you've had so much experience, I feel funny that I'm even leading this part of this show with your 11 years in the mortgage industry. But I know that the mortgage is one of the most misunderstood financial tools, as you did in your intro, Will. And it is one of those things that more money for the average person will flow through their hands in their mortgage than any other asset that they own, but yet they mismanage it terribly.
Oh, yeah, there's no question. I mean, having so much experience, I have story after story after story of common things people have always thought to be true about how their mortgage should be done that are just not true. You do the math on them. It's about math. It's also about emotion, right? And so one of the most common things I've always heard is that a 15-year is always better than a 30-year. I mean, how many times have we heard that either on a radio or some sort of talk show or even on TV, whatever it might be? That's like the most common thing in the world. And I mean, it'd be easy for me to start with the numbers, right? But one of the greatest stories I can remember, just sticks out to me like a sore thumb, is one of my neighbors actually called me about refinancing. He was in his 50s and man, he was excited. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm about to retire maybe in the next 10 or 15 years. I want to be best prepared. I'm going to pay this mortgage off in 15 years. He'd already paid it down by like 50%. So he only owed a little bit on the house to begin with. So we went ahead, took care of this mortgage for him. And literally 5 months later, he's calling me just desperate.
What happened?
Joey, they let me go. This is 2010, by
And
the
you
way.
were working at one of the nation's largest banks, and you were managing, 10, 20 loan officers, correct?
That's
For those
right.
of you that are listening who don't know Joey's history, he was in the mortgage industry for a decade?
Almost 11 years,
Almost.
yeah.
So there you go. And you know what you're talking about here.
I mean, I did hundreds and hundreds of mortgages. So the fact that this sticks out to me tells you something. So he calls me just desperate. Like, what can I do to lower this payment? They just let me go. And it wasn't like he was a fly by night guy. This guy had been with the company 10, 15 years by the time we did his mortgage. And all of a sudden, he's not marketable. He's in his mid to late 50s. It's 2010 for crying out loud. I mean, nobody's hiring. He's asking me, is there any way I can help him with the mortgage payment? And unfortunately, we put him into a higher payment so that he could pay it off in 15 years. Even though the interest rate was lower, payment was higher. And so he began 2 years of, I'm even trying to help this guy find jobs. I mean, I feel guilty almost. I'm trying to send him to headhunters and, hey, can you help this guy find a job? And long story short, after 2 years of him desperately trying to find whatever, he's researching.
Probably
all kinds of
depleting
stuff.
any accounts that he had had.
I mean, he
right?
didn't go into the details with me, but there's no question he had to dip into retirement savings.
Favors with friends and family and everything else.
Yeah, it was brutal. He didn't end up losing the house, thank goodness, but after 2 years, he was in a devastated state, finally found a job, and his world was turned upside down.
Well, I want to break that down because you mentioned a lot of parts in there that goes into why I feel like this is such a mismanaged tool. You know, there's a great book, and I love this book. It's called The Killing Sacred Cows by Garrett Gunderson. And we always recommend books on this show, and that's one of the ones that I encourage people to get. And he talks about the mortgage as one of those sacred cows that people feel like they have to have a paid off house. I mean, that's the American dream, if you will. And I want a paid off house on a balance sheet, but really the risk to go into trying to get people to that point, the traditional ways, is very risky. And you identified one that almost cost this guy his house, but it is the idea that I'm going to get a cheaper interest rate. So that's what everybody looks for. That's what's promoted. When you look on the internet, you look online, or you see the advertisements, 100% of all the information out there being promoted is on interest rate. So
That's right.
That's the number one thing. That when you were a mortgage guy, how many times a day did you get a call going, hey, by the way, what's the rates today?
Oh, it was every single conversation.
Every single conversation. That's what people believe is the number one factor, right? Into buying a home, getting the mortgage, they want to know what the interest rate is. That's the number one most important factor, which you and I are going to get into today, which should be probably number 3, 4, 5 on the list.
That's right.
They believe because of that interest rate, I'm going to pay more in interest on this mortgage. So that's one of the things. They don't think about what's the cost of it. I want to get into opportunity cost today. But just because it's so emotional. It is really, people put their family pictures, the memories with their children or grandchildren or whatever into this house. They really are detach their logical, rational brain of how to handle money. And they go, this is emotional. It's my home. And they won't make that sort of financial decision. And what I like to talk about with people is there is a house and then there's a home. The house is the bricks, the mortar, the drywall, the mortgage, the black and white of it. The home is the pictures, the couch, the storage building, all those things that go along with it.
You make an interesting point on that because the majority of people that you talk to who own a second home or a third home or a property, you're never like, I'm going to my lake home this weekend. Mm-hmm. It's your lake house, right? And I think that whether it's subliminal or not, the primary memories of their life, we've talked about the 401 condo, right? And the 401 lake house, and memories are made there, but it's not a resting spot. It's not your home.
Right.
And I think people, even whether they know it or not, are calling it a beach house or a lake house. You've never heard someone say, I'm going to my beach home, my lake home this weekend, right? And that's kind of what society has put on it. So that's a very interesting point that you make there.
They tend to separate the rational brain, the financial, and that's what we're talking about on this show. Is about how to build wealth without Wall Street, right?
Right.
And the idea that's built by the Wall Street bank is mortgage based. And how many, by the way, in your 11 years in the mortgage industry, if you were to try to count how many different mortgage types there are.
Oh my gosh. There's numerous, and now they've shrunk over the years. There was some pretty creative stuff back in the 2005, 2006 era. But I mean, you've got everything from fixed rates from 15 to 10 to 30-year terms. You've got adjustable rate mortgages that are over 3, 5, 7-year time frames, balloons. I mean, you name it. Interest only,
interest
negative
on negative amortization, reverse mortgages.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. So it's easy for people to get confused, I think. And I think that's part of the Wall Street mindset too, is to
No
give
doubt.
people things that they don't fully understand. And then they get people, unfortunately, like I used to be, that will get them into the mortgage that best suits the bank.
Well, exactly. Because what you're saying is if the banks made the same amount of money on every single loan that existed, how many loans would they truly have?
Right. They only need one.
They'd only have one loan option, right? If they made the same amount. So the fact that they have 10s, 15s, 20s, or whatever it is, different options, tells you they make different amounts on different things. And that's what I want to get in today on today's show is what are the things that make the banks money? And more importantly, what are the things that cost us money? Because that's what matters.
Right. People get so dialed into the one factor of cost, and that's interest rate. As you were mentioning earlier on this, I was just like, man, how much marketing and advertising goes into interest rate. You go on to the websites, different websites, you always see these little pop-ups about America wants you to refinance to a 15-year mortgage. I'm like, and there's somebody dancing.
Well, and let's talk about the whole mindset of it's today, now. You got to lock it in. You got to do it now. It's happening now. It's going to go up. It could go up. You got to do it now. It's just this threatening what else am I supposed to do? Of course I'll lock it out. I don't want it to go up 3/4 of a point. I mean, come on.
Right. But there's so much more behind it. But the point you made, again, this show is all about wealth without Wall Street. And this is just one thing we want to bring back into the light for you as you're listening. This is something you're being manipulated with, okay? Because there's so much more behind it. The interest rate is just the first factor. The second factor, I think people, as you mentioned, was opportunity. So why don't you say a little bit more about that?
Opportunity cost. So really most people know what opportunity cost means. Is if I had $1 that I don't have access to, what would that dollar be worth if I would have done it? Well, the thing that is, and we've talked about on the show, we finance everything we buy.
That's right.
100% of everything we buy is financed.
Even with cash, Russ?
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Are you for real? Absolutely. Because that dollar could have done something for us. So it has a cost. Now, that cost may be less expensive than not doing it that way, but how many people are doing the math? If you choose a 15-year mortgage, typically speaking, it's the less interest rate, right?
That's right. So about 0.5%.
Right. So you're going to have, let's just use today's interest rate. Assume it was 3.5% for a 15-year mortgage, 4% for a 30-year mortgage.
If you lock it in today.
Right. Most people think, though, it's 0% if I pay cash. Well, that's false. Because if my cash then does not have to go into this mortgage, what would it earn for me? Right? What is the cost of me not paying the mortgage off? What is it going to earn? And I don't know what that's going to earn. And for everybody, that's a different answer, but that's the equation that people are not talking about. So from an opportunity cost standpoint, you've got to sit there and look at it. What are some of the things that drive cost, though, of a mortgage? There's more things than just interest rates.
Well, but let me back up one second. I don't want to miss this because if you're hearing what I'm hearing, you may have missed this little piece. So there's two parts of that. If you have the cash to pay for buying this house, like Will, I know you're looking to buy a house right now.
Yeah, straight cash, homie.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You got $200,000, $500,000, whatever the number is, sitting in an account somewhere. That's one piece, and then the financing of that house would be the monthly payment. Right. So you have to separate those two things. We kind of get caught up in this. Well, if I had the cash, well, I wouldn't have the payment. Well, you also wouldn't have what the cash could have been earning. If that $500,000 was sitting in an account, what could it have earned over that same 30-year time frame?
Because I'm hopeful, as if you've been listening to our show, that money is not just sitting in some asset not producing a monthly income stream, right? It needs to be producing a monthly income stream, which is the offset of a payment, right? If that monthly income stream from whatever that cash is producing is greater than that monthly payment, now you're in a position of financial independence.
Right. Well, and let's just simplify this, okay? Because we're listening to this. You can't necessarily be drawing this out for somebody, but if you could be earning 5% somewhere with that money, and instead you pay cash for a house that you could be paying 4% on over that same time frame, I'm not really that smart, but there's a difference there.
Well, let's just say that your 5% was $2,000 a month, and your 4% was $1,700 a month. It's costing you $300 a month.
Exactly. Compound that over 30 years, right?
For the rest of your life. And what could that money be worth? I mean, not only are you losing the 300, but you're losing what the 300 would have earned for you too.
That's right.
Because unless you're consuming that 300, then you're reinvesting that into
I do, and people are going to say, but it's going into my house. My house is an asset. Okay, well, the house next to yours, let's talk about that really quickly. How does that affect your appreciation of the home? How much money you have into it?
How much money I have in it, like as far as my mortgage balance, it affects zero.
Nothing. Correct.
Right. If you owe 100% of that home's value or 0% of that home's value, it's going to rise or fall with the market.
Regardless.
We used to always say it would rise with the market, but after 2008, we have other thoughts. But that's such a great point. I mean, we talk about how bad mortgages can be misused and misunderstood, but equity, I think, is the number one thing that I end up having to, as we're meeting with people, explain what is really going on there. So, I mean, we always talk about this, Russ, but share some ideas on what equity is as an investment.
Well, I mean, I think of an example of right now. I mean, we're in the tragedies happening in Houston with this flooding and Hurricane Harvey. But it reminds me back to when I first got into the industry. I was down in New Orleans. It was about the time right before Hurricane Ivan happened. And I got to hear actually a story very shortly thereafter that how when Hurricane Ivan came through, one of my colleagues in this industry had a client who believed wholeheartedly in the fact that his equity was worth zero to him if it was sitting dead in his house. And so he had actually been employing his dollars in lots of different places, but he had a big opportunity fund. We've talked about opportunity funds on here. You need to have a place in which your cash is working, but also very safe.
Not an emergency fund.
An opportunity fund.
Thank you.
He took advantage of when he saw an opportunity. His business was devastated by Hurricane Ivan. They were having to remodel he was some sort of physician or whatever. He was going to have to remodel his place for like 2 months. And it had all these trees down and all this stuff. He hired a team of guys, went and bought like some big, huge like tree stump grinders and like chainsaws and stuff like that. And they went around through the neighborhoods and just did work in people's yards for cash and made like $100,000 over a 30-day period of time. And he saw a need, was able to fill that need because he had cash. That same cash that would have been sitting in his house, which his house obviously was worth a lot less because of the water damage and everything else that had happened to it. He took advantage of an opportunity. And there's so many ways to do that. I mean, I'm not telling you to take this money by far and just go invest in something you don't know anything about and put your house at risk. That's not what I'm talking about, but it is opportunity. We need to think about what are we doing with our cash? Are we less at risk with our cash in our house? Or are we more at risk with our cash in our house? And in your guy's example, he had 50% of his house paid off and almost lost it.
That's right.
Had they foreclosed on it, how much of that money would he have got back?
Oh, zero. In fact, I mean, we talk about this. If there's two houses, I want you to picture this for a second. There's two houses next to each other. They're neighbors. One of them owes 100% of his home's value. The other one owes 20% of his home's value. They both foreclose at the same day. Which one does the bank want more than the other one?
They want the one with all the cash in it.
I mean, why? It just makes sense. It's just a business proposition for them.
Well, why in the world? I mean, why in the world were there people still living in houses in 2010 who hadn't paid a mortgage payment in 2 years after the recession? Why is it? Because all those houses were worth less than what they were valued at. So the people
nobody's in a hurry to take that over.
All the homes that were being sold were homes with equity in them.
Right.
Guarantee you that was. I mean,
and is that an agenda? I'm not saying that's an agenda that's being pushed. Don't hear that the wrong way. But as a loan officer at a bank, are you encouraged to share the 15-year mortgage, the refi idea? Like, is that something that they're like, you need to do this? And I'm not saying that's because they want to take over the house quicker. I'm just bringing this idea up.
I mean, let's just say that, you're building a book of business at a bank doing mortgages. And what they will always do is they will tell you who would benefit, quote unquote, from a 15-year mortgage that's in your book of business. So I would get lists of people to reach out to. Hey, by the way, just want to let you know this is available. The rates have just dropped and you could do a 15-year mortgage for not much more than what you're spending right now and blah, 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 blah. Those type of things were constantly in my face. I mean, Russ will tell you, as his client so many years ago, I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't even understand all the things we're talking about today. So that's what I'm passionate about, really sharing these things now.
Well, I've got kids, and 3 of them are girls, so I've watched basically every, girls movie you can watch.
Princess.
Let
Right.
it go.
So one of those that I watched, though, Mary Poppins, very famous movie,
Oh,
and one of the famous songs in there, they're talking about investing in the bank, right? You need to put your toppings into the bank. And one of the things it talks about is talking about the interest rates and other things. And it says in that song, think of the foreclosures, right? And he says it in a joyful, happy way. Think of the foreclosures. And my wife looks at me and says one day, she goes, after hearing that song 50 times, she says, well, why would they be excited as a bank about the foreclosures? Because she's thinking of the foreclosures when the house is worth, 50% of what they owe on it, right? And I'm like, no. But see, in those days, all the homes were, most mortgages were no more than 50% of the value from the very beginning. So the house was worth 100
yeah.
and they would only give them a loan against 50. So when they quit paying on the thing, the bank were thinking of the foreclosures. They were excited about the foreclosure.
Monstrous.
And that's what happens in today's market. But moving on, because I want to keep on pointing on this, is there's other things that go into the cost of this mortgage that most people don't think about.
well, hold on. I don't want to pass this up, okay? Because this is
He
something
always
that's
keeps reeling us in.
this stuck with me so many years ago when you asked me these questions. I want to ask everybody else. I want to pass this on, okay? So if I could guarantee you this great investment, okay, it was guaranteed to earn 0%. It's guaranteed to be illiquid and guaranteed to have no tax benefits whatsoever. How big of a check you want to write me for that investment right now?
Can you do the cricket sound? I don't know how to do it, but cheep, cheep.
Okay, I just want that to stick with you. If that sounds ludicrous to you, that is the equivalent of paying extra on your mortgage to pay down into your equity in your house. That's the investment we're talking about, and we're going to have to move on from that. But I just wanted to share that.
Because your equity earns 0, you get no tax deduction for the principal. You only get tax deduction for the interest rate.
That's right.
And as you know, as a mortgage officer, that equity is virtually illiquid unless you really don't need it, right? Unless you
Right.
can prove
When
that you have so much money that you don't need it.
When my neighbor called me without a job, guess how much of that equity I could give back to him? 0. No access. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, okay. So moving into this, because people look at interest rates and they miss a crucial factor in interest rates, and that's taxes. We're not CPAs, so this is not a course on how to deduct a mortgage interest. But as an individual, every single year, I give my accountant a statement, usually 2 or 3 from the different mortgages and things that I have on different real estate properties. And one of those things is mortgage interest. I get to deduct that mortgage interest. Now, there's some phase outs as you get to certain incomes, but sometimes people get lured into the go and, oh, what's the phase out? Oh, I don't get to deduct that. They don't realize it only reduces their amount that they can deduct by like 2 or 3 or 4%. It's not a ton, but that interest rate is crucial. So let's think about this, Joey. Let's say my mortgage payment is 4%, right?
Right.
And I'm in a 30-year mortgage.
Right.
So what is my true cost? If after I get to write off that interest at the end of the year against my income, what's my true cost?
Well, what tax bracket did you say?
I said I'm in a 30% mortgage, or 30% tax bracket.
Okay, not a 30% mortgage. That would be pretty brutal. So that puts you at a 2.8 effective interest rate after you get to deduct that interest.
Okay, so the other day I was on this kayaking trip, right? We're talking about things, and I'm around people that most of them know me, but not everybody knows everything that I do. And we were talking about the idea of me moving into this house, and somebody said, "Well, how'd you pay for it?" Right? Everybody wants to get in my business, right?
Oh.
They want to know a little bit about Russ here.
Little do they know we produce a podcast for everyone to
That's
hear.
right. And I'm gonna tell it. It's like, I'm an open book. So I said, "Well, how do you think I paid for it?" Right? One of the ladies goes, "I think you paid cash for it." And another guy goes, "I don't know, man. Not a lot of people got that kind of money to pay cash for it," right? So everybody's sizing me up, trying to figure out how much money I have or don't have. And I said, well, when you think about it, regardless of how much money I have, I wouldn't be very good at what I did if I put cash in something that I can only have to earn more than 2.5 to 3% on. And everybody gave me this eye like, I mean, if your business is earning on money, like putting money to work, building wealth without Wall Street, and you can't earn more than 3%.
That's a problem.
And not in year one, right? Because we're not talking about year one, because there are years that things don't go the way we want it to. But over a 30-year period of time, if I can't earn more than 3%, I'm not really good at what I do.
Oh, this is a great reminder. And we need to put this in our show notes, but the greatest article recently, Warren Buffett was interviewed about his second home down in Malibu, which I don't want to over-sensualize the deal. He bought it for like $150 in 1971, and now he's on the market for $11 million. Not my house. That's his house. I get it. But he was interviewed and they asked him, so obviously you had the cash. Why didn't you pay cash for it back then? He said, well, a 30-year mortgage is the best vehicle that Americans have to use to their benefit. He said, I took as big of a mortgage as they would give me. That point is probably 80% mortgage. He said, and what I did is I invested in my company. Now those shares are worth $750 million. So to your point, if he couldn't have made more money by investing in his own company than in a mortgage, he's only paying whatever the effective rate was, then he needs to get out of the business.
But see, it's so funny though. People go, Warren Buffett, that guy, he was wealthy in the 70s.
That's right. He had the cash.
They were saying, why wouldn't you just pay it off? Well, because it would have cost me $750 million. And now I'm not Warren Buffett. My money's not going to be worth $750 million. Maybe it will, but I mean,
749.
Yeah, maybe. Whatever. But at the end of the day, the average person is sitting there going, but I want my house paid off.
But they think short term. You got to think long range. You cannot be afraid to do that.
What is the opportunity cost on it? And knowing that there's more to it than rate, there is deductions that most people don't talk about. And there's another one, inflation.
Oh, this is big. I always love how Russ tells me inflation is termites in your wallet. The thought that whatever I'm paying today, that dollar is worth the most it will ever be worth today. And that's because of inflation. It's always chipping away.
That's the unfortunate truth of where we live and how we live today. Yeah.
Will, the house that you were looking at.
Yes, I am in the market right now. And it's a disaster.
If you could make one payment, just one payment, right? It could be today for whatever the house's value is, or it could be 30 years from now, the same house, the same dollar number. Let's say it's $250,000. If I bought the house today, it's $250,000. Or I'm going to write a check 30 years from now for $250,000. Which one would you do?
The 250 30 years from now would probably get me rent for a year. Yeah. Like it's a disaster.
Yeah, because it's going to, with inflation, that $250,000, thanks to our Federal Reserve inflating the money supply, stealing money out of our pocket, means that $250,000 today is only worth maybe $125,000. 30 years from now. Or if you want to do it in a monthly
even
payment,
less than that.
If my payment's $2,000 today, maybe it's only worth $800 and something 30 years from now. Why do we want to pay the banks with our most precious dollars, our most valuable dollars? They're more valuable today than ever. If we're going to keep up with inflation, we need to be putting those dollars to work in an account that's keeping up or outpacing inflation. We've always heard that. But is it opposite of what people do with money?
Well, exactly what we've been talking about, this Wall Street mindset. The banks are pushing that down to say, you know what, we could give you a 30-year at 4%, or we give you this benefit of 0.5% lower rate at 3.5% on this 15-year. Why do they do it? For the very same reason we just said. They want our most valuable dollar. I mean, I'm just going to make up a number here, but if it was a $1,000 payment for a 30-year or $1,500 for a 15-year, which one did they want? They want the $1,500 because that dollar is worth the most today. They want to take advantage of it today.
And they want to get more dollars today so they can put more dollars back to work. There's no secret to their sauce. Why are we not following the same recipe? Why are we not following the wealthy? Do exactly what the wealthy do. Do you think Donald Trump has his house paid off?
No.
I mean, you know how much in mortgages he has. You could just go, I'm sure, well, maybe maybe you can't figure out his...
He doesn't release those tax documents.
You should be able to see that tax return mortgage interest deduction, but maybe that's being held back. But I digress out of that. The idea, though, we know there's mortgage interest being written off, but yet that is the part, and I think it goes back to one, everybody is being taught interest rate. They're being taught a paid off home is the BMW of
Oh,
today
my.
or whatever that garbage
Oh my
is.
gosh.
The idea is we're
What,
not
a depreciating asset?
we're not talking about we're not talking about consuming, right? We're not talking about consuming the difference. Because if that's what you're doing,
You're out.
the old adage
Yeah.
in the conventional mindset or the mainstream mindset of buy term, invest the difference, for instance, it was really buy term and consume the difference.
Exactly.
And it's what happens really in the difference of the person who could make a 15-year mortgage payment, who makes a 30, if they go and spend it, that's not helping them either. If you are, though, looking at, I can be disciplined enough to make this payment, and I don't, and I do something else in a method that is not putting that at risk, and you've got to be able to assess risk in your situation. If you have a business, if I can invest that extra $500 to $1,000 a month in my business, what could that produce for me? Or if I have an extra $500 to $1,000 a month every single month, how does that free me up from the burden and stress of cash flow requirements that are happening? Whatever your situation is, I know that maybe through those things over a long period of time, I will come out ahead. But here's the thing, and I'm going to leave you with this thought because we've got to shut this down. But here's the thing, Joey, in 30 years, let's assume that you make 30-year mortgage payments. You take the difference between what it would have been on a 15-year mortgage, you put it away, you invest it, whatever you're going to do with it, and you only have the same amount of money as if you would have paid the 15-year mortgage and then invested the money for the last 15 years of that. You have the same exact amount of money. Which one would you have rather have done? Had access to the money for the whole 30 years or have been a slave to that payment for 15 years and then hoping the 15 years of savings was enough to get you to that point?
Right. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And that's that last, we've already talked about the first four real costs, but the risk factor is exactly what we started off with, the story of my neighbor. That is a risk that we don't have to take. Why would we unnecessarily put risk into our financial plan? And I hope that today we've really just given people an ability to zoom out, because mortgages are so easy for people to zoom in just for this one particular thing, and they don't think about it in light of their whole picture. But when we pick the wrong mortgage, or the mortgage we think is the best at the time because we just look at it as this one little blip in time, then we put ourselves in many cases unnecessarily in risk, and we're not maximizing or optimizing what we could be doing. If you can't be earning more than 3%, or what we just talked about, 2.8% somewhere else, please call us, okay? Because we can help you with that. I mean, 2.8% is not hard to find. Day in, day out, no risk. We're not talking about taking unnecessary risk with money. We're saying just be smart about it. Zoom out, see what you can do with that money instead of just putting it unnecessarily in your mortgage.
Well, you think about that. I mean, because I'll be honest, I'm an open book, as I told you. So for the last almost 15 years of me understanding how these things work, I have been taking that extra payment, and I even take it to the extreme. I go interest only and have been forever. I take that difference and I'm putting in those specially designed insurance contracts that we talked about, I don't know, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, to earn 3, 4, 5% net after tax. But by the way, it's kicking off a dividend and a death benefit that's 5 times that.
And tax-free.
And for me, those are the kind of risks that I say, man, if something goes wrong, I want to take care of my family. I want added benefit, added value. And hopefully that's what our podcast is to you today. But please take this and look at it and challenge yourself not to look at your house as a home when you're talking about the money part of it. Separate the pictures, the emotions, and look at what the black and white are. You do that on a daily basis with your business and with the investments that you're already making. Do that with this one, because a lot of times this may be your largest investment, and definitely one that will have the most cash flow coming through your hand.
And keep in mind, we went over 5 things today. 5 reasons that erode the wealth, your wealth,
the cost,
just the ultimate cost of choosing a 15-year mortgage over a 30-year mortgage. And those were risk. Well, you had a certain order. What was the order?
Interest rate,
risk,
opportunity,
inflation, and taxes. So guys, if you are thinking about taking that step to a 15-year mortgage or refining from your 30 and going to 15, consider those 5 things before you do that, and consider where your wealth could grow better than sitting in your home. If you need help with that, we've got some notes in the show notes showing you some places that you can store that wealth, that you can properly save that wealth in a tax-advantaged environment, in a place that is continually compounding, because believe it or not, $300 a month that is going into your house for 30 years can make a humongous difference in your lifestyle, not only today, but 15, 20, 30 years down the line when you really need money, when you really need passive income. And that is what this podcast is all about, is teaching you ways to become financially free. We do believe that when your passive income is greater than your expenses, that's where the money is made. That's when you are financially free. Head over to the show notes, the website at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com to grab all that information. We're here for you. See you next time. This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.